Hokie Hangover live on YouTube, but you all know that already because the comments are already jumping. Um, After about 7 weeks ish, Virginia Tech has hired a defensive coordinator, none other than Arizona Cardinals linebackers coach Sam Siefkes, which, uh, if you're saying you knew who that was before this afternoon, you're full of absolute shit. I will say that. But we'll talk about it. Virginia Tech has a defensive coordinator. It took 46, 47 days, whatever. Here we are. We have a defensive coordinator now, guys.
If that's what you want to call it.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Ricky LeBlue coming out swinging as we'd expect him to be.
It's not that bad.
So before we, I guess, chop this higher up, I guess we should read off the man's resume. Since, as Mike mentioned, not a single soul in this fan base had any idea who this guy was prior to about, 6 hours ago. As Mike so eloquently mentioned, Sam Siefkes, according to the pronunciation guide from the Arizona Cardinals, just finished his second season as the linebackers coach in Arizona. Before that, he was with the Minnesota Vikings for 2 seasons, one of which was a linebackers coach. If you want to go back to the last time he was dealing with young men, he was the defensive coordinator and inside linebackers coach at Whit Babcock's favorite institution that is not Virginia Tech, and that would be Wofford College. Prior to that, he was the defensive coordinator and inside linebackers coach at UW Platteville.
That's within the University of Wisconsin system. That's a pretty good program.
$100 to anyone that could point out the general vicinity in which Platteville is on a Wisconsin map.
I bet you our podcast co-host Andrew Alex knows where Platteville is.
I'm not going to lie to you, as someone who
no freaking clue
has a family home in Wisconsin. No clue.
Okay, well, you know what? As I will say, out of the three of us, you were the most likely.
I was the most likely. I'm the one who has the Wisconsin garb, and we've recorded this podcast from the great state of Wisconsin. But no, not too hip to Platteville.
Worth a try.
All right, so what we're gonna do, I think, tonight is, Mike seems to be the one that is, I guess, the most optimistic about this hire would be the proper, appropriate way to put it, Mike. If I'm steel manning your argument, so fire away, Michael. Please talk me down off of my rant, of which I am prepared to unleash.
Sure.
Should you not convince me?
Well, let me preface it by saying this. If you're Brent Pry going into year 4, where you have to absolutely have a good year, this is quite the choice. I like his resume a lot. He's been defensive coordinator at Wofford, 2 top 20 scoring defenses. Very good track record of play calling. Clearly had Wofford in the FCS playoffs twice on the backbone of their defense, right? So he's proven that he can call plays at the collegiate level. You would love for that to be at the FBS level. If you can coach, you can coach. He got hired out of Wofford into the NFL in his mid-20s, which tells you something, right? He's coached under Dave Aranda as a graduate assistant when Aranda was at Wisconsin as a defensive coordinator. He has coached at Minnesota under Mike Zimmer, one of the best defensive minds that the NFL has had in the last, 2 to 3 decades. That's encouraging. He had good things to say about Siefkes. Jonathan Gannon, good things to say about Siefkes. Everybody seems to think that this guy is a up-and-coming coach, aggressive, a guy who, everybody is saying is very smart. all the things you want to hear if you're hiring a 31-year-old defensive coordinator. He has better experience than Chris Marv has, or had, I guess, right? When Marv took the job at Virginia Tech. So I think that at the very least, from a resume, play calling, experience standpoint, the guys he's coached under, the play calling experience as a defensive coordinator, albeit at the FCS level and at the D3 level, he's had play calling experience. That's something that Chris Marv couldn't say when he got the job at Virginia Tech. So those are feathers in Siefkes' cap, so to speak. With that said, and I think he's got a bright future. Clearly, coaches that are worth a damn are saying good things about him. I think he's got a bright future. If you're Brent Pry, though, this hiring process took you, well, about 7 weeks. Obviously, if you're going into a really pivotal year for Siefkes, is not your number one option, right? I mean, he's simply not. If he was, you would have hired him weeks ago. He wasn't your top option. Jay Bateman was on the board. Didn't happen. I actually like this hire more than Jay Bateman. I wasn't going to be thrilled with that hire. I don't think he coaches a very good defense. Yes, he has more coordinator experience at the FBS level than Siefkes does, but I would not have loved that hire. Poindexter, Virginia Tech talked to him. I think he thought he was going to get the defensive coordinator job at Penn State. Ends up getting hired over by Jim Knowles, who's the best defensive coordinator in the sport right now. And then they keep him on staff with a huge raise. Virginia Tech can't close the deal with him. I don't know how interested Poindexter was with Virginia Tech. I just know they talked early in the process. That didn't come through. A bunch of other guys were named, including some Ohio State position coaches that had less play calling experience, less experience than Siefkes did. I'm okay with this hire. The problem is, I don't know if you're Brent Pry, if this is the one you want to like lay it all on the line for, right? Even though I do like his experience a lot, and I think this has potential to work out very well for Virginia Tech. This is a huge risk for Brent Pry, like an unbelievable risk to take, where obviously I think if you're first getting the job at Virginia Tech and Siefkes had a resume like this a few years ago, then maybe you take a swing with a guy like this over Chris Marv, because he would have had more experience than Chris Marv. Obviously not at the time of hire, but this would have made a lot more sense for your first hire, not your second, when you really need to have an experienced coach at the power conference level, in my opinion, to really inspire some confidence in the fan base. Again, I like it. I like him. I think it could work. But this is a hell of a risk for Brent Pry to take, man. And like, we all know that this coordinator hire has to hit, or Pry's going to be in a lot of trouble. But with all the good things that are being said about this guy, plus the defenses that he's coordinated at the FCS level that have been very good, like not just good, they've been very good, like top 20 good. Plus you got Bud Foster as whatever role he's going to be in, advising this guy. Plus you have Pry on staff still. And Siefkes has a track record of coaching some pretty good linebackers in the NFL, right? I mean, linebacker was a huge issue for Virginia Tech. I think at the very least you upgraded at linebackers coach here, which does matter. It's been the weakest position on the defense for 3 years. I think at the very least you upgrade at linebackers coach. And I think this guy is bright enough to figure out the defensive coordinator. Plus he's got the play calling experience. So I like the hire. I think it's a gamble. I don't know if it'll work. Could be great, could flame out, could just be fine. I do think it has potential to be better than Chris Marv, though. And I think that Brent Pry can be a little bit more hands-off with Siefkes in terms of the play calling. Doesn't mean he won't have input. But this guy, I don't think, needs to be babysat, which is insane to say because he's 31 years old. But I like the hire a lot.
So you didn't convince me, Mike, as you might have guessed. So here's
I'm shocked by that. Shocked.
Here's where I'm at, boys. When Brent Pry was first hired prior to the 2022 season, and he hired Tyler Bowen and Chris Marv, What was our chief complaint about those two hires?
Ooh, I got this one, Rick. No previous defensive coordinator experience.
And it was a lot of the same thing for Tyler Bowen, right? He had very little experience as a coordinator.
Yeah. You can't bring in a first-time head coach and then a first-time coordinator on both ends. And then, you got to worry about things like clock management. We all knew that.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
So, well, not all of us, apparently. So, Virginia Tech makes those two hires, and saying that we got mixed results out of those two would be generous, in my opinion, for both Bowen and Marv. So Brent Pry says, okay, I'm going to make a change at defensive coordinator. It takes him 6 weeks to hire someone that hasn't called plays in 5 years, 4 years? You're hiring someone that hasn't been at the college level in that long, and the last time that he was, it was at the FCS level. You're hiring somebody that has been essentially a position coach at the NFL for a couple seasons and is just getting his cup of coffee in. This reeks of almost desperation by Brent Pry in making a change for change's sake. And that's a
little
hallmark.
disingenuous, don't you? That's a little disingenuous, don't you think?
How?
I mean, Marv.
Okay, so I've talked to a few people throughout the day, people who I like, people who I trust, people who are part of this media landscape, and I will not quote the person as to promise their anonymity. But I said, would you rather have this gentleman or Justin Hamilton? And they all said, this guy. And I said, would you rather have this guy or Marv, knowing that you can keep the continuity? And that individual told me, I'd rather have a wet rag than Chris Marv. So take that as you will. So to call it change for change's sake, I don't want to call Ricky disingenuous because I don't think Ricky LeBlue's ever been disingenuous.
I wasn't calling Ricky I don't think Ricky's disingenuous. I thought
kind of what it sounded like, Mike.
I thought that. Okay, back up. I'm not attacking your character, Christ. I'm saying that I think it's a little disingenuous.
Wait till next season, Ricky. Then we'll start attacking each other's character.
We'll see. I think that it's a little disingenuous to say that he just fired Marv just to make a change. I think that's crazy. We watched this defense for 3 years go like this. We watched a linebacker play largely go like this.
We did, Mike, but you know what? We also saw that on the offensive side of the ball. And guess what? Nothing changed. So
Rick, offense scores a lot of points.
I made the argument when Marv was let go, and I've been someone that's
they had one of the best running backs in the country the last 2 years.
Hold on, but let me finish.
Am I crazy?
I've been very critical of Chris Marv and the job that he did at Virginia Tech, and I think everyone is aware of that on this show.
Yep.
I've also been extremely critical of what Tyler Bowen did at Virginia Tech and how inconsistent the offense has been under his tutelage and his tenure, and how the quarterback play has not improved after we saw some brief improvement at the end of now 2 seasons ago. So I was making the case when Marv was let go that I'm not even sure that Marv was the coordinator that I would have fired if I needed to pick one. So you take your unit that performed the best from last season, which I think by all accounts, the defense, if you look at the statistics and the numbers, the defense was better than the offense last year. There's tons to criticize there. We did it all season long. No one's disputing that. But you've got a coordinator that you supposedly believe in, a guy that you coached as a player, a guy that you brought in under your wing, and you jettison him, and then you take 6 weeks to hire somebody, and then you hire someone that hasn't done this in 4 or 5 years. To me, that seems like Brent Pry made the decision to move on from Chris Marv, did not have a concrete plan in order to make a replacement, and then fumbled around for 6 weeks and ended up having to settle on someone that seems like is not really qualified for the job as far as I'm concerned.
Fumbling around versus missing on your guys are like two completely different things. Just because he ends up at option 4 or 5 on this list doesn't mean that he fumbled around, screwed around. There's all sorts of things that play into that, right?
If you're going to make a move like that, though, you've got to be confident that you're going to get one of your top guys. And I don't think anyone can convince me that he was one of the top guys that Brent Pry had on the board.
I have a hard time arguing that he was a top guy that Pry had on the board, a top 3 option. I would have a hard time arguing that because it took this long to hire him, right?
Well, not just that, but I think we know for a fact that he wasn't a top 3 guy. I mean,
right.
Considering all the different names that have been cycled up to the top during this search, I think we all know that he was probably more like 4 or 5 on the list.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't think that you made enough of an upgrade here to justify changing your scheme and then blowing up the entire continuity that you did have on a unit that I think made some progress last year, certainly had a ton of flaws. And Mike, the point you made about linebacker is, I think, the strongest point that you made. Linebacker was awful under Chris Marv. That is unquestionable. Hopefully, the linebackers will be a little bit better under this guy. But for me, I think you're making a decision here, and you're not getting enough reward out of it to make those kinds of changes, those big changes within your program.
I don't think you know that yet, though. How do we know?
Well, Mike, but by that logic, we never know anything, right? I'm only going off base of the information that I have right now.
I think the information's okay, though.
Based on what I have right now, he doesn't seem like he's a great candidate for a P4 coordinator job. He just doesn't. And that's my opinion. I might be wrong. The guy might field a top 30 defense next year. And you know what? I fucking hope he does. I would love to see Virginia Tech top 30 defense next year. But I just don't. I needed more than someone who's an up-and-coming coach that hasn't called plays in 5 seasons. I needed more than that. And honestly, I think Brent Pry, who has shown plenty of issues that he has coaching, needed someone with a bit more chops than this guy.
Maybe, you know what, Ricky, you make a good point. Maybe he hired a former FCS defensive coordinator because we're playing like an FCS team. You know, maybe that's what it is.
Was that one of the ones you had in the can?
Yeah, and maybe that I was waiting for the right time to slide it in. Maybe that's the idea behind all this. Maybe he was a top 3 candidate. Maybe that's why, right? Like we're a lot closer to the FCS than we are to the college football playoff. Maybe that's why we made this hire.
So I'm gonna throw up a quick comment here from Hokie's Rock. He thinks that Pry locked in on one guy and then got shot down in the end, and by then it was panic mode. I think that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm not going to say it's not true either, considering it seemed like Anthony Poindexter was the leading candidate here, and that Poindexter was like playing footsies with Brent Pry while we're trying to angle for the DC job at Penn State.
Yeah, leverage, baby.
Yeah.
I saw on Reddit people saying that Penn State should bring in Brent Pry for their DC opening, that he might be looking for work. It's neither here nor there. First of all, listeners, one of the great joys of my life was I had this maybe 15 minutes before it went live to the public.
You did. You beat Pete Thamel.
But I did beat Pete Thamel by, again, I thought I would beat him by longer than I did, honestly. But I had this. And texting it to Mike and Ricky, I just sent him sent the two of them, just the Arizona Cardinals staff page for this guy. Mike says, "I think you're sending me this for a reason," and Ricky says, this is a family podcast, so I can't say everything that Ricky said, but
it's a family show.
a lot of who is and a lot of is this, and there were some words in between. But look,
I said I said shit 40 seconds into the show tonight. Like, but yeah, it's family show. Good point.
If things keep going the way that they are, we're going to have to soundproof the podcast studio as your child becomes more impressionable as he gets older, Mike.
Yes, that's true. That's true. You can sit him right here. You can be at the fourth chair. You know?
Yeah. Producer Scott, you're fired.
Start him young.
But no, nonetheless, all the reasons that Mike is holding on to some semblance of positivity are reasons that I, in my empathetic brain, can very much get behind. Because who knows? Everyone starts somewhere. But I feel like everyone starts somewhere is exactly what I said 2 years ago with Marv.
Yeah.
And we did that. And then we all left with this consensus that what was lacking was, what's that fancy word? Experience. And that maybe we need to turn to someone with more of that. So to go through this, I wanted to say like 3.5 months, but we'll call it a month and a half long dog and pony show. And to end up with a guy that you could have ended up with on whatever day the Arizona Cardinals played their last day +1, right? Like, that's when this guy became available. And he's been available, and despite the fact that you can't do crazy stuff with NFL coaches, and you can't, hire and then they continue on throughout the remainder of the season, you can talk to their agents. So this deal could be as good as done on January, we'll call it the 10th, to be generous. And here we are. The consequences are not like, everyone knows what the consequences are, right? The team doesn't play well. Brent Pry is potentially out of a job. And then we'll look back at all of his decisions and question them, as we have. So in that sense, it's wait and see. You got to trust it, if you will. But
Don't have to. But
you don't have to. and I guess that's the overall point, Ricky, is that as someone who I've said many times in this podcast, I like Brent Pry. I've met him many times personally. I think that it would be wonderful if the program could succeed under this type of personality. And as such, it stresses me out when he makes decisions that I do not necessarily think are on the forefront of his own self-interest. And that's sort of how I feel today. So you're here and you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, Mr. Siefkes, shout out to the Minnesota Vikings pronunciation guide, because we knew that one right off the bat.
it's helpful.
Very.
He could be a great defensive mind, and I want to believe that he is, right? Apparently they were doing some cool things. In Arizona, he has a good track record in terms of the individual guys he's been working with at the linebacker position, which like we've talked about, has been an issue for half a decade now. But what's the word that we talked about a lot in 2022 and even into 2023? Learning curve? I guess it's more of a phrase, but learning curve? There might be something of a learning curve. And I don't know if Brent Pry has time for a learning curve. And that's what worries me here, gentlemen.
I don't know I don't know if there's much of a learning. What's the learning curve? He's called a defense. He's been a position coach in the NFL. There's learning curve with the team. There's learning curve. There's the mesh with Pry and what you want to run, right? The scheme I think will be talked about a lot he's coached a 4-3. He coached a 3-4 at Wofford, right? So I mean, that would be a change. So I mean, it kind of depends on what Virginia Tech ends up running here. I have a feeling that this is going to be a lot of, well, you can run your stuff, but this is the personnel we have. So that's going to take some time if you want to change the scheme up at all. Like that'll take some time, but we're going to run what we can run with our guys. That's how they should approach it, instead of kind of fitting players to a scheme where they're not recruited to play in that scheme. I think that would be a hard thing to do. It's proven to be a hard thing to do. The scheme's going to tell us a lot. I don't think this is, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think this is going to be the learning curve that it was with Marv. I think there was so much learning on the job with Marv. I just think there's going to be less of that here.
Can I pause you real quick, Mike? I want to ask Ricky a question. Who do you think is more qualified at the day of hiring? Mr. Siefkes or Mr. Marv?
Siefkes.
Okay. Yeah. That's a positive step.
I mean, Marv hadn't done this at all. I mean,
yeah.
Siefkes has done it. It's just been a while, and that's one of my reasons for concern. But I mean, I was extremely critical of the Marv hire when they made that hire. Just as like I was with Tyler Bowen, I didn't think that either of those hires were very good decisions. And Siefkes' resume and body of work, I think, is better than what it was when Marv was hired. I think that's pretty clear. But I don't know. Maybe I'm naive, and Virginia Tech really can't do better than this. That's certainly a possibility, given where the program is and given where Brent Pry is in his contract status.
That's a conversation we can have, because I'm with you there. That's a conversation we can have. Let's have that.
Well, okay. So let's think about it. I mean, if Anthony Poindexter is your 1A candidate,
yeah,
and you're Anthony Poindexter, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I've got a really good staff here at Penn State where we win 9+ games every year. We just made the Final Four. We're one of the top 10 programs in the country, essentially.
Every year, all the time.
Yeah. I've got a head coach that's not going anywhere. I've got a potential for being the defensive coordinator at Penn State, although we saw that didn't turn out well for him, at least, except he got a fat check. But why would I risk my career by potentially doing a 1-year stint at a middle-of-the-road Power 4 program for a coach that may not be around after next season?
Okay, that's a positive about Siefkes, though. And Mike pointed this out on Twitter earlier today. Gotta love a guy betting on himself. Gotta love a guy betting on himself.
Sure.
Oh, Ricky, that was so dismissive. Come on.
Just like, I appreciate that you guys are trying to be optimistic on this, and I respect it. And I don't want to completely dismiss your arguments, because I do see your reasoning as to why you're optimistic for this. Maybe I just had too high of expectations for Brent Pry to fill this position. And where I'm sitting now, he didn't meet those expectations that I had. And I'm now concerned that Brent Pry is entering a pivotal year in his tenure in Blacksburg with a huge, giant question mark at quarterback, a very large unknown at defensive coordinator, tons of holes from last year's roster that already wasn't very good, at least by the win-loss record. And he's got his own foibles as a head coach that he needs to fix and that he hasn't fixed in 3 years. So I was really hoping for someone that I could rely on that had a long track record of being competent as a play caller and as a coordinator on the defensive side of the ball. And I just don't think Siefkes is that guy. Now, that's, again, not to say that he can't be that guy, because he certainly could be. I'm not a big believer in him right now, considering I think what is a very brief track record that doesn't seem all that conducive for early success as a P4 defensive coordinator.
He had 2 top 20 defenses
at FCS, Mike, and it was 4 and 6 years ago.
You got to coach somewhere. I mean, that's insane. So he's had a good track record. He's the 2 years where he was there 3 years. The 1 year got canceled because of COVID. The 18 and 19 seasons, the only 2 data points we have, right? Full seasons of calling plays are good. We can't just dismiss it because it's a lower level of football. So you're saying he can't do that at a higher level of football with better players? Why not?
Well, he's facing better competition. And 2, I'm also saying because it happened 6 years ago, Mike.
What
I don't
difference
know
does
if
it
he's
make?
going to be
it
that.
Could happen 20 years ago. What difference does it make?
Mike,
if you can coach, you can coach.
The college game is completely different now than it was 6 years ago, and he's been at the NFL level, which is also completely different.
I will play the devil's advocate here because, first of all, I'm enjoying the hell out of this. But second of all,
I am too.
Ricky, Mike is right. We can't totally discount his previous accomplishments.
This was
Mike, 6 years. Let's talk about things that we haven't done in 6 years, and then if we asked ourselves to do that again, how good we'd be at something that we hadn't done in 6 years. Which again,
he hasn't been working on Wall Street. He's been coaching football.
I know, but even in the moment. I mean, do you think Chris Marv is some sort of defensive imbecile? No, it's just a different thing to do. To, in the heat of the moment, call a defense. It was something that Bud Foster was exceptionally good at. And to be able to make adjustments and all that stuff, which is not to say that he can't do it. We're just saying, yes, he's done it, but he hasn't done it in a little while. I haven't run 5 miles in 5 years. And it would be harder for me to do that if I just tried to pick it up right now. Doesn't mean I'm physically incapable of doing it. If you gave me some time, I could probably do just that. And I know a lot of people who know me personally are probably laughing right now. But either way, there's pros and cons here. But to the degree that I lean towards Ricky's general sense of pessimism on this, is the fact that if you're Brent Pry, this is do or die. And this is not if it was a transfer plug and play where you're going to feel confident about it right away, this guy is going to know exactly what he's doing because that's probably what you needed. Now, there's a separate conversation we can have.
I agree with that. Yeah, well, I do agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. I don't want to discount this guy's football prowess or future career potential. But Shane Beamer, Atlanta, Georgia, week 1. Come back the following week. We can talk about the schedule tonight if you guys want. This is the part we knew for a year. But Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia, according to all the big time publications, a top 15 quarterback coming back in all of college football. 0-2 is a possibility. A strong one at that. After losing to Vanderbilt in Blacksburg, by the way. Do you think if we could fast forward 8.5 months onto this podcast, what people are going to be saying on just this podcast, where we try to keep it calm, cool, and collected with a sense of peace, love, and understanding towards all? I don't think the mood on this thing is going to be very good, let alone on the message boards and on Twitter and with the donors calling it Babcock.
Now,
you have to have a guy who was ready yesterday, is my point.
To be completely fair to Siefkes, Virginia Tech could be 0-2 to start next season, and it could have nothing to do with him.
I was about to say that too.
he might put together 2 decent games, and they still might go.
I was gonna say, is he gonna keep it to a 1-score game? There's no guarantee. I'm glad I was able to use that joke tonight too.
Oh.
He can keep it to plenty of 1-score games. He can have the Hokies in it, and then we know that track.
Ricky, I see in the comments though, Bryant Cobbs asks who Ricky would have thought was a suitable hire. So we could talk about. I'll ask you this:
more experience at the P4 level.
Jay Bateman was the name that we all thought it was going to be up until today. Which, by the way, is shades of we all thought Bill O'Brien was going to be the head coach of Virginia Tech for 15 minutes before Brent Pry was hired. But would you have been cool with Jay Bateman, Ricky? And if throw some other names out there.
Well, I don't know a ton about Jay Bateman's resume, so I briefly looked at it earlier today when we thought that he was the guy, and then about 17 minutes later, Andrew Alex was like, "Never mind."
Here's a picture of a guy you guys have never heard of.
Yeah. So I mean, Mike essentially answered the question why you were asking it, Andrew. I would have liked someone who had a legitimate track record of at least moderate success of play calling and coordinating at the P4 level. I think I would have settled for someone that had done it at the G5 level. I think that would have been a fine compromise. And again, that goes back to the conversation that I brought up earlier about how maybe my expectations of what Virginia Tech can realistically hire at this stage of Brent Pry's tenure are just not in alignment with reality. And maybe this is the kind of hire that Brent Pry looked at and said, I can either go get a retread and someone that's been fired from their last 2 jobs, but has done this a lot, or I can swing for the fences and swing as hard as I can and maybe make good contact with it. And that's kind of what this looks like to me. Brent Pry was not contact swinging with this hire. He's swinging for the fences. He's going for somebody that supposedly is an up-and-comer in the world of football. And look, I know that Virginia Tech put out those, glowing quotes about him from Zimmer and Jonathan Gannon and
O'Connell. And
yeah, I mean, look, to be honest,
we like O'Connell though. Smart guy.
Former Redskin. Those don't really mean much to me because what else the hell are they going to say about their guys?
Do I gotta bleep that in post-production, or are we?
Not on this.
No, not on this program.
I'm joking. I am joking. God, you guys know me better than that. Jesus.
I'm pretty sure that was one of the executive orders Trump signed on day one. Is that
my God? Hell, baby. Yeah.
But again, I would have loved someone that had done this before and was doing it recently, not someone that is going to be stepping into a role that he's never been before at this particular level. Again, not saying he doesn't have some chops and he doesn't have potential. I think he does have a lot of potential, but doesn't really fit the mold that I was hoping for with this hire.
Doesn't fit the timing. Like
if he had hired Siefkes, if Siefkes had existed as he does now in 2021 before
that's
the
what I'm
2022
saying.
Season,
that's why that was
Brent
my
Pry
argument.
had made that hire, I think there is a lot more justification.
Agree.
For someone saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to hire a guy that has a ton of potential, is going to make a leap to this position, but is someone that I can grow with and someone that really has the ability to do this and just needs some time to get his feet wet." I think that would have made a ton of sense back then. Now, it doesn't seem like it fits what Brent Pry needs at the moment. And I know, Mike, you addressed that in your opening monologue.
Poorly, but yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Virginia Tech, and Andrew mentioned it, right? The Hokies can go 0-2 to start the season, and things are going to look really weird in September. Virginia Tech really needs to get off to a hot start, and they're going to now have to do that with a question at quarterback, a potentially brand new scheme on the defensive side with a brand new play caller that is doing this for the first time at this level. That's a scary combo. And again, not saying it can't work because it can, but I'm skeptical, and I would have liked to have seen something different.
Yeah.
And really quick, before you guys say anything, Caleb, you're banned from the show.
No, Caleb.
Ricky wanted Jeff Collins. Have you listened at all to the Boston Basketball Conference podcast?
He has. One of our biggest fans, actually. He is.
I have made so many Jeff Collins jokes.
He is. That's probably where this is coming from, to be honest with you.
Look, Ricky is not Tim Thomas, and we will never compare him to Tim Thomas. Tim Thomas literally wanted Jeff Collins, and we love you too, Caleb Fields. Thank you so much. James Gilmore, by the way, is there any contract information for Mr. Siefkes? I'll be putting in a Freedom of Information Act as soon as they'll let me. As soon as they'll let me. I gotta know.
Do we want to transition into the schedule?
Oh God.
We can touch on it.
Yeah. We don't have to spend a ton of time on it.
I don't want to be us in the month of November. Actually, maybe I do. Content might be fantastic, to be honest.
The content might be incredible in November. So in case you've been living under a rock, folks, here is your 2025 Virginia Tech football schedule.
All right. First of all, living under a rock when the schedule came out at 9:45 Eastern on a Monday, and we're recording at 11.
A little disingenuous, Rick. A little disingenuous.
Listen, if you're not clued in immediately when the schedule comes out, that just shows me that you're not committed. You're not a real fan.
The best part about it is that Duke and NC State basketball fans were really, really mad about the ACC football schedule release. Guys, the basketball game's on. Oh, sorry. Sorry that we interrupted the weeknight basketball game for the ACC football schedule in January. I'm sure a lot of people were really distracted by that.
Are they playing college basketball in the ACC this year?
Yeah, there it is.
That's what they're calling it. It's college basketball.
Yeah, loosely.
So we have the game in Atlanta against South Carolina. Next week, at home against Vandy. At home against Old Dominion. At home against Wofford. So no true road games in the month of September. That Old Dominion and Wofford game might come in handy when it comes time for bowl season. I'll just put it there. At NC State to finish the month. Then you've got your conference opener at home against Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, Cal, Louisville, at Florida State, Miami, and at Virginia. So that's 7 home games this year, which is pretty cool. You guys mentioned it before we even read it off. November looks like hell. You're going to open it with Louisville. You're going to go to Tallahassee to face Florida State. Who the hell knows what kind of team they're going to field this year. You get Miami at home, and then you finish it up at Charlottesville, otherwise known as Lane Stadium North. What are your thoughts on this schedule?
November's bad. Louisville's going to be good, I think. Florida State should be better. Miami, we'll see with Carson Beck. But even so, I mean, Florida State's a little bit of a wild card at the moment, but I think Louisville and Miami on paper are better than Virginia Tech. Virginia, I just continue to pencil it in as a win because Virginia Tech just simply never loses to Virginia.
Hey, they just picked up a transfer from your favorite team.
I will say that Virginia has done a nice job in the transfer portal in the offseason. I don't know what that will mean for literally anything, but we'll see. They did a little bit of a swap, by the way. They got Jaden Thomas at tight end from Notre Dame, but then Malachi Fields, their best receiver, went to Notre Dame. So it's just a little bit of a... That's a trade I'd rather be on the Notre Dame side of, I think.
Maybe the more important question here is Tony Elliott coaching that game?
I haven't looked at UVA's schedule, but
me neither.
This is much tougher schedule than Virginia Tech had this past season, I think we can say. This is Brent Pry's toughest schedule since he got here by by a good margin, I would say, just by looking at how November shakes out alone, plus opening with a good South Carolina. That'll be a top 15 at worst South Carolina team with Sellers.
And as James mentions here, no bye week until week 8, right before the weeknight game, Thursday or Friday. ACC could make up their damn minds about what night they wanted that game to be on.
Oh, is that the Cal game, Rick?
Yeah.
Because I think as a podcast, we might be circling the Cal game as our tailgate for next year. Bowl game, we can't be too sure about a bowl game, so I'm planning in advance.
I'm not sure that's happening.
I was going to say, I tweeted bowl game would be an accomplishment. I really do mean that. I mean, conservatively speaking, I mean, Virginia Tech's going to be a 2-score dog against South Carolina on a neutral. They're going to potentially be a home underdog against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's losing a lot, but they still have Pavia coming back. Tech will potentially be a home underdog against Vanderbilt. You should win the next 2. NC State will be bad. Will be probably bad, but Virginia Tech will probably be bad too. So that's going to be a toss-up. Wake Forest will be bad. You have to win the NC State, Wake Forest games. You have to win those. You have to be 4-2 going into Georgia Tech.
And you've got to beat Cal, because I think we're going to pencil in the Jackets as a loss.
Yeah, how about welcome to 2025? You're a Virginia Tech fan. You're circling Cal as the tipping point game, if you will. That's the tipping point.
You got to win.
We lose to Cal, this podcast is going to be fireworks.
You got to win 2 out of 3 at Georgia Tech, home against Cal, at UVA. You got to win 2 out of 3 to make a bowl game, and that is contingent on you beating both NC State and Wake Forest and splitting the non-con. Bowl game is not far from a certainty. Far from a certainty next season. In fact, the Vegas, I saw somebody put this in the comments earlier. The over/under win total, Gilbert G. What's the over/under on wins? What do you guys think it'll be? I think it'll be around 5-ish.
I guess I'll put it at 5.5.
Yeah, it'll be 5.5.
Yeah.
What I'll say, right, is anyone who's followed politics, presidential politics, over the course of their lifetime, right?
Ricky and I at the same time. Where are we going with this?
No. When you're looking at that electoral college map, and you're creating the scenario.
11:38 on a Monday night, and you're just talking about the electoral college map on a Virginia Tech podcast. What are we doing?
I'm laughing at Mike's face, laughing at me. But no, when the side that you want to win is creating this very narrow scenario. Oh, well, we just need to carry Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, all of them, and we can't lose one, and then we're good. That's kind of how I feel about the bowl game. If it's this narrow path,
okay, we
have to get.
We landed the plane. That was good. Continue.
That could have been worse, couldn't it have? But no, that's seriously how I feel, though, is when the path looks so narrow, having been a fan of Virginia Tech football over the course of the last 2 decades and knowing that you're going to drop one to the likes of God knows who, and you point out Cal, Wake Forest, and NC State as those potential landmines for you, it's just not super encouraging.
It's not. No, it's not.
It's just not, especially given that, again, we're learning on the job. Once again, we're learning on the job.
Love it.
So only 5 true road games. Ricky mentioned this. Only 5 true road games. And I think Virginia Tech needs to win at least 3 of them to make a bowl game.
So what? Florida State, UVA, NC State. So actually only 4 true road games, Mike. Because you've got 7 home games. You've got one neutral.
Is that Cal game really at home?
Yeah. That's Thursday or Friday nighter in Lane.
That's what I'm saying. That is our tailgate next year, Mike.
Yeah.
So
Come on, dude. Give me the program.
Tim Sands' homecoming
Like,
game.
I'm trying to understand how Virginia Tech got a 4 road game schedule with 1 neutral.
So you got 8 ACC games. That's a fair question.
Yeah, that's why I'm.
Well, if that's the favorable thing, God bless, right?
I mean, it is. I mean, it is. I think it's right. Sorry, this is bad podcasting. I think
it's very bad podcasting.
But anyway,
that being said, we're going to point out Caleb Fields makes a great point. Siefkes is going to be very hyped for the Wofford game. I mean, you can't make up these storylines, and that's why we all stay locked in, and we keep listening to this podcast, and we hit subscribe and notifications because, I mean, gosh, our new defensive coordinator has a revenge game against Wofford in week 3. Like, I was not planning on attending the game, but now for the 11 a.m. start, I'll be there at 6 a.m.
Mike, the Georgia Tech game is on the road.
Yes, it is. Yep.
So you've got at Virginia, at Florida State, at Georgia Tech, at NC State. Those are your 4 road games, all conference.
I think you got to potentially win 3 of them to make a bowl game, depending on what you think of that home game against Wake or home against Cal, right? Because I mean, I think it's like we were talking about. I think, you know, let's assume. I don't like assuming for a number of reasons. Let's assume 2-2 in the non-con. Okay, conservatively, right? Tech lost to Vanderbilt. They're going to be a two-score dog against South Carolina. They should be favored against Old Dominion and Wofford. Let's assume 2-2. The Georgia Tech, Cal, Virginia, like those 3 games, I think are going to tell us everything. Virginia Tech will be an underdog at Georgia Tech, I think. Georgia Tech's got a better roster coming back. Virginia Tech will be an underdog there on the road. But you got to pick one off somewhere because I look at NC State. Like, NC State's going to be pretty bad, but like Ricky said, kind of an unknown. And then Wake, I think, will be bad, and you get that at home. You almost got to win both of those, or you got to sweep Georgia Tech, Cal, and Virginia to make a bowl game. Like, I think you may need to end up winning 3 of your 4 true road games. It's crazy, but that might be what you have to do. And I will say, Brent Pry has beaten Wofford already one time in his tenure. Remember, year 1, that was one of the 2 victories in the first season. Wofford and Boston College. So
that was one of the games in year 1.
Wofford, Boston College,
and
Liberty.
Right?
That's right. Three wins. Thank you.
Great point here from James Gilmore. Miami does not leave the state of Florida until November. They get Notre Dame at home, Bethune-Cookman at home, USF at home, Florida at home. Then they go at Florida State, Louisville at home, Stanford at home, and then they go to Dallas on November 1st. That's crazy. Yeah. Does Charlottesville really count as a road game? Salute Hokies Rock. Great. Great.
Thank you, Hokies Rock. But let's
great take.
In the peak of negativity, they're getting a lot of good transfers.
That was solid.
I had like a peak Alonso morning gif where he's like, "Oh, good point."
There's a couple comments in here about staff shakeups and whether or not we're going to see any more. Considering that
Quinn was on the board.
Was a potential DC candidate.
He was on the board.
I don't think Sean Quinn is going anywhere. The Pearson Prelo one is interesting. I do wonder what would have happened to him had Poindexter taken this job. But given that they've brought in someone as a linebackers coach who's also going to be the DC, I think Pearson's probably pretty safe at safety.
The only place we thought Sean Quinn was going at 11 o'clock this morning was the defensive coordinator job. So,
yeah.
The schedule of events today went
wild.
Me texting you guys this morning around 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever it was. I think it's Bateman. Like, sourced reporting, I think it's Bateman. To just kidding. Maybe it's Sean Quinn. To then Andrew texting us 15 minutes before the news broke. Actually, guys, it's this guy. It's Siefkes. Oh.
Who?
Who?
I had to break out the Snoop Dogg gift.
We
today.
We went on this kind of roller coaster.
I really wish I could have had a live camera on Ricky LeBlue when he saw, because that was not a happy camper. That was not a happy camper.
Ricky and I could not text quickly enough when you sent that to us. We were like, wait a minute, what?
It's so jarring.
It's just like, and I hope to God that this guy is a revolutionary defensive mind, and that we can take all of this audio as a situation where we take our lumps and we were totally wrong. But I think the longer that this thing lasted, the more the Hokie fan base, ourselves included, got this feeling that, oh, well, if it's taking so long, it's got to be something big, a big name. Like, maybe not a heist to the extent that Penn State pulled off within the last 48 hours.
I have a comment to make on that too, by the way.
But yeah, like, oh, okay, like, good things come to those who wait. And for it to be a name that no one had ever heard before is just, my phone battery is going down from the amount of text messages I'm receiving. And it's not a good sign.
The comments, the rumors about Jim Knowles to Blacksburg, insane. Like,
wait, that was a thing?
No way. I saw people talking about that on the timeline.
Rumor?
I'm like, what?
Hey, Tim Thomas said it would make sense.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Insane. Like,
Jesus.
Knowles was coaching two places. It was back at Ohio State, where allegedly he had some sort of rift with Day, whatever, maybe.
I mean, it checks out.
Or Penn State. I think it makes a lot more sense now that would have happened after coming off national championship. You could have paid Knowles he became the highest paid defensive coordinator in the sport at Penn State. Ohio State has that money.
Well, apparently not. If you read the report that came out earlier today, they were $37 million in debt after this year.
I saw that.
I'm sorry, they ran at a $37 million deficit for this year.
Hey, there's a cost associated with winning.
Yeah.
Got to pay for Jeremiah Smith somehow. One quick thing.
Are they going to lose him, Mike? I know that was a possibility.
We don't tamper in this sport. That's not something that
nobody.
That's not something that we do. I just want to put that out there. But say that we did, there are teams that would like him to enter the transfer portal. And it's
every team in the country.
Yeah. And the ones that are serious contenders are like all the ones you would expect. No. I mean, no.
Give me Ole Miss for 500.
Jeremiah Smith is one of those rare players in college football where you would pay him a lot more than you would pay, especially this coming year. You would pay him a lot more than you'd pay like a starting quarterback. He's like one of those rare. He's a rare guy.
Would you give him an NIL valuation higher or lower than that of Mr. Marvin Harrison?
I thought you were going to say Carson Beck.
Carson Beck can pay me.
He definitely went to Miami for football reasons.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Real quick, producer Scott, he's been texting me. He doesn't have to do that. It was a labor of love. He doesn't need to do this now, but he had been texting me every day for the last, or every other day roughly for the last like 2 weeks or so, when Virginia Tech wouldn't hire a defensive coordinator, he was like, oh, it's this many days. It's this many days. He's like 37, 39, 40. And he would just like reply to his own text in the thread to me. So there's just like a long list. There's a long list of just numbers with like no context. If you're just like looking at it for the first time, he can finally rest at, was it 46 days? We made it.
Jesus.
With Sam Siefkes.
We did it, boys.
All right. Final thoughts.
Good work. It's risky.
Winter workouts begin soon. I'm glad we finally got a coordinator. I put out a post on X yesterday when they announced that they were going to do the schedule at like 9:45 p.m. I was like, which one are we going to get first, the coordinator or the schedule? And everyone said the schedule. You're all wrong. We got the coordinator.
But it was close.
It was close.
It was close.
My final thoughts are, number one, thank you, Jaden Daniels, for reminding me that football is fun. And despite the fact that, like all things in my life, it had to end by blowing up in flames, we appreciate the effort. Number two, I saw LeBron James live and in person tonight. Ricky LeBlue, not a LeBron James fan. Learned that today. But I saw him as a rookie in 2003 when I was a young child, not too much older than Mike's child, who he's going to start negatively impacting if he doesn't put soundproofing on the walls of the podcast studio.
Okay. It's like, where are we going with that?
I'm obviously joking. Mike is a great father. I got to see LeBron James today, so very cool. And to Gilbert G's question, who gets fired first, Pry or our new DC? They would get fired at the exact same time, my friend.
Correct.
I was gonna say,
they ride together. They're in it together.
Fired first is not in that question.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The answer to that is Whit Babcock, actually.
Oh, man. Siefkes is just going to go and coach in the NFL if this doesn't work out. He'll be fine. Pry, on the other hand, well, I mean, Pry will get a coordinator job.
I was going to say, maybe Knowles ends up at like Alabama or something, and then Pry can go back. We'll record again at some point. I don't know when exactly. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Rate, review, subscribe.
Shout out to Count's Family Pharmacy and shout out to Home Field Apparel.
As always. We'll be back soon. Good pod tonight, guys. This is good.
Yeah, thanks for everyone. The comment section was jumping tonight. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. If you're listening and you're enjoying, again, rate, review, subscribe with the notifications.
Yes. Notifications on YouTube. You'll know when we go live. Until we meet again, go Hokies.